And maybe 321, I don't know. 321, something like that. Hello, everyone. It's nearly the end of the year. Don't worry, we're still here. And I'm Alan, and with me are Dan there, Will, and Chris, and maybe joined by others later, who knows. We work at Anchore on the open source team. You can see over here our two friends, Syft and Grype, who accompany us on this journey. We do this every Thursday, pretty much, and we go through some issues, figure out what things need to be discussed, and have a conversation about them. And if anyone asks us questions or asks us to look at a particular thing, then we will. If you'd like to subscribe and like the video, that helps. You can also follow us on all the usual places. We're on Twitter, Mastodon, Blue Sky, and all of that kind of stuff. But the main place to hang out really is GitHub. That's where all our projects are located. You'll find them down here. Syft, Grype, we've got some GitHub Actions, a whole load of other open source stuff that supports all of this. And these wonderful people work on this all day and love it. So we have a post on our discourse, which I do every week. And in that, I highlight that we need to look at things that need discussion. And then anyone else, there's Tim, who's posted some things that they would like to have us discuss as well. And we'll get to that as well. We also have things that the team might bring up. So if anyone's got any burning issues they want to discuss, we can do that here. We're a bit light on brains, so we're all going to have to level up a little bit for this week. I'm sure we can all do that. I'll try. Does anyone have any issues they want to discuss? Anyone got any burning issues before we look at needs, whatever's on this this forum post? I know I have one.
Bring it forward.
Do you want me to dive in?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me see if I can find the link. So this is an issue. I will paste the link literally everywhere. If I can find the chat. Where is it? There it is. Bop. So this was actually an issue that Will filed, and it was a request for feedback. So, not technically an issue as such, but more RFC, request for comments. And it's about this Grype Explain feature. We've got a blog post about this that Will wrote that talks about how you can use Grype Explain to give you more detail about an issue that Grype knows about from the Grype vulnerability database. And one of the pieces of feedback we've had is, would it be possible to change the way that Grype Explain runs? Because the current implementation is you run Grype against something and you produce JSON output and you pipe that into another Grype, which you run with the explain option, and then you pick whichever CVE or issue that you want to. Actually, I could probably demo that. That's probably a nice thing to do. So if I just run exactly that as it's in the explanation. So this will run Grype against Alpine 3.7, which is an old one, so there might be some issues. Pipes that JSON output into Grype again with the specific CVE. So if you know there's a CVE that is affected, this might be taking a little while, might be downloading the database, might be downloading the container, I'm not quite sure.
Of course, with the pipe, we don't do our fancy, standard out isn't a TTY, so we're not doing our fancy terminal tricks.
Yes, there is that. So while that's happening, and we'll come back to the output of that, I guess the thing that is in this issue that was some feedback we got, and I've certainly felt this as well, and I'm sure you probably have as well, is it'd be really nice if it was simplified slightly, and I wonder what we could do to figure that out.
There's nothing really stopping us from saying, I'm going to go rewire Grype so that it does this way. I think we want to think about it a little more than that. So I'll be perfectly honest, the reason Grype Explain works that way is because Grype builds up data throughout its invocation. And the easiest way to sort of inspect all that data holistically and explain it is to wait till it's all done which is why Grype explain effectively just runs after Grype. One of the advantages, though, is you could put, like, if you put Grype-OJSON to a file, you can repeatedly explain vulnerabilities without rerunning Grype, which is something you'd actually lose in this implementation. So I do want to be able to keep that.
Gotcha. That does make a lot of
Yeah,
sense. I hadn't considered that. Oh my, it's still going.
yeah. You might want to
It
do, well, I guess it'll probably finish, but
it ran on my
you
local
could run
really
it.
quickly.
Well, he might not have the database. So you could do that and pipe it, like redirect it into a file and then just cat the file into Grype explain.
Ooh.
It's not that.
Test.json. Oh, you got it.
Yeah, whatever.
I like my verbose file names. My man.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh, you have a -q. That's why it's not
That's
doing
true.
the 2A.
I copy and pasted that straight out of the issue.
Yeah.
Oh. I have had this before. I wonder if it's disk space.
Could be.
It could be disk space.
Yeah, I
Maybe.
don't know. I mean, you could try a Docker pull Alpine 3.7 and see if that works.
The other option is just like go to another machine and do it somewhere else.
Yeah.
Like that, which is
Oh,
fine.
amazing.
Yeah, it works fine on the machine behind me there. I blame macOS.
Yeah.
And then, so what? Just pipe the
Yeah, then you
JSON
can
through
just
that. So I could just
you can just
the,
cat. Yeah.
Oh crud! I called it 3. And just pipe that through that.
Yep.
Boom.
Yeah.
So that's what we were trying to demo. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And you can see like there's some nice helpful things in here. So one of the things you get is you get sort of all the reasons that Grype thinks your image is vulnerable to the CVE. So you can see we had a CPE match on like Alpine's BusyBox and a CPE match on like Alpine's SSH client. This is super old Alpine, so don't everybody go worry about Alpine.
Course. Yeah.
But yeah, so it explains. So it's intended to be really helpful for people who are like, Grype found a match. I don't believe it. I didn't know I had that package. Maybe this is a false positive. Maybe it's just confusing. And so I sort of built this when I was investigating a lot of false positives and trying to understand them. And it's intended to give you enough information that you know exactly like what, apt-get updates to run or what. And you have like, you could, frankly, if you think it's a false positive, just go hit new issue and paste this in and say, I think I found a false positive. Here's the image. Here's the output of Grype explain. And that's enough for us to investigate pretty well.
Nice.
But yeah, I totally agree that we should be able to just do -- explain on there. I think the question then is what, like, do we want other interactivity? We've talked a lot about, I think everybody has stuff they wish was in Grype's default output, but we try to keep that like pretty greppable and pretty fits in your terminal. And if we start putting, 500 character paths in there or whatever, it starts being a lot harder to read. So I think one of the questions, like people have periodically mentioned, like Grype, do we want like a Grype interactive mode that like drops you in a TUI where you could like press enter on things? I think Ellen's built something like that as a quick Python prototype. We also have a how to make Grype's output more focused discourse issue. I'll try to find that. So this is sort of
That one?
related. Drop it in the meeting chat. Sorry,
Sweet.
I was looking on a different screen. Yeah. So there's some suggestions there. And so I agree. Like you should be able to Grype explain without invoking Grype twice. That seems like a very reasonable ask. Um, I want to think about the mechanics of it for a minute and sort of whether there's other things we should do while we're here, or other changes we should make to Grype's output while we're here. Um,
I think the hard thing for me on being able to do Gripe explain without doing the pass through is when you do it in the first sense, the document becomes the holding place of all the data, and you can just keep running explain against that. But for larger images, if you run Gripe against the image and then explain a thing, if you're doing the reanalysis of that image over and over again, that's that's costly as far as time and just like the compute on your computer. So Gripe has to like evolve a little bit to have some way to cache a report they can just reference without the person saving it on the computer, and a way to also just bust that and have it go away, at some time in the future. I think that's like the logical step forward for it because we don't want to implement that and have people keep rerunning analysis over and over again on their machines.
yeah. I think that that makes a lot of sense. That can be helped a little bit by caching a Syft SBOM, right? And then repeatedly running Grype on the Syft SBOM. That helps. Dan, were you going to say something?
I was just going to throw out like another, because I agree, like for a big image, or there's definitely it's a little awkward, right? Time consuming, but just in the interest of throwing out other options, another way to solve that problem would be to have actually a optional like dash explain to Grype, and it actually outputs the explain for all of the CVEs that were found. Right, in one shot. I mean, that's going to generate a lot of data, but at the same time, I'm thinking of explain, like where it fits in the flow is Grype by default shows you like that first order. Here's all all of the vulnerabilities that were discovered. Grype explain is for that second order. I want to know more about exactly the stuff that doesn't fit into a table format because descriptions and past, to your point earlier, Will, too big. So it's that second order. Okay, I need to know more about that one. Another way to sort of shortcut it would be to actually just have an output mode that's actually just explain rather than the table output, or -o explain almost could be another think about this.
Yeah. Do you think it's worth having subsetting? I think one of the I think one of the hard things there is that you would then end up like to use that, if a vulnerability has 50 or if an image has 50 or 1,000 matches or something, you end up with tons of pages of Grype explains, and you're just going to end up grepping through it or whatever.
Sure.
So it might be worth accepting like a comma separated list of IDs you care about. So you could do Grype normally, and then you could do -- explain ID, CB1234 or CB2456 or whatever.
Yeah, I suppose that
that-
especially makes sense if the where you first saw it is in a CI job, for example. So if you first saw it in a CI job, then you haven't got anything locally. You don't have any of the JSON locally, so you're going to have to run it once. And if you just run it once and having looked at the report in your CI, where you see here are the CVEs that are critical, you then go -- explain and then and list them all. Then it only has to do it once locally, and you get all of the data maybe.
Yeah, that would make sense. So it could be like an output, but with parameters. And we do that already, right? Like you can ask Grype for a template output, and that takes a template file. And so we could just say, -o explain, and that takes explain IDs, which is just a comma separated string of all the vulnerability IDs you want explained. I think that's very reasonable user experience that people would be happy with. And then I think if we wanted to, we could, I think, leave the detection of standard in, so that if you have Grype JSONs laying around, you can still pipe them through Grype explain and not have to rerun. Like maybe you have a really big image and you want to dive into vulnerabilities like one at a time or something. Yeah, should we try to write that up in a little comment and put it on the backlog?
Yeah, I guess what did we capture? Do you want to do this or?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
I'm happy to do that.
So I think
I have
the
owed this to
interesting
the
thing
community for a long time. Oh, go ahead.
No, sorry. I was going to say that I think that just being able to do a comma separated list is like one atomic little improvement. Like, and another improvement is being able to run the explain like without being piped. Those are like seem like two separate things, but they could be all together if you're touching that bit of code. I guess I don't know.
The other feedback that I would have that probably should be captured for this too, after I've used it a couple times, is all of the filters that we've wanted to apply to the JSON should be applicable to explain. And when I say all the filters, I'll make like a subset of that, meaning like, I want to see everything that's critical as Grype explain. I want to see everything that's a Debian package and get the Grype explain output, right? If you can filter it in the JSON output by that kind of quality or qualifier, then explain should have like a mirrored experience. Like they should flip between the two.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's an interesting, I think, side effect of making explain an output format rather than a bespoke command, right?
Yeah.
Because then wouldn't we get all of the other filtering and kind of for free?
Yeah, that would be super good because you could do like but then if it's its own format and not a command, how do we feel about like Grype-o explain? It's like, we just drop the command support and we go right there. Yeah.
And I think Grype explain as a subcommand can stick around with standard in, but yeah, we'll have to think about the CLI UX. Currently with Grype explain, you can pass --ID as many times as you want, and they're all explained in that order.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So nice. That's a little like you don't have to do the incantation a bunch of times. So
no, it's Grype Alpine, isn't it? Hmm. 4.8. So I could just punch another one in. I had no idea this was a thing that you could do.
It just keeps growing the explain output.
Yeah. It literally just explains each one in order. Yeah, I think another improvement I really want to make is I want to make explain have a JSON output. So if you want to like call into Grype and have a machine readable explanation, some of this is, in some sense, this is a human readable wrapper around the current Grype JSON output.
Yeah.
But it might be nice to get to be able to get some of this information. But
it does amuse me that we would take the Syft JSON to take it to Grype, and then Grype turns that JSON back into different JSON that you're going to put into something else. Like eventually, a human is going to read this. Hopefully, yeah.
Or some language model, one of the two.
Yeah, true. Excellent. Have we covered everything? I think there. Were there any other improvements that you've seen or that people have mentioned to you?
I feel good about this one right now.
Yeah.
And I'll just kind of emphasize it's a super useful function. There's a particular use case that I've recommended to various folks who are doing this second order. Like they get a vuln scan, and then have some question. And one of the top level questions is about having multiple packages installed with different revs. Like the developer has in mind, like my application only has dependency version 1, but this CVE is against dependency version 2, and that doesn't make any sense to me, right? And they think it's a false positive, but without explain or looking at the JSON, you can't really see from just the default Grype output that, yep, indeed, you have another version of that package installed in the container somewhere else that's, part of some other package that you weren't aware of. It is definitely there, and it's that location field. So like the explain is a really useful way to see for a given CVE, you've got 2 or 3 different versions of that package installed, and this is the one that the vulnerability is matched against. So yeah, super useful for that second order.
So I feel allowed to show my stupid tool Grummage that I made a few weeks ago because Will mentioned it. So I'm allowed to show it. But yeah, this was a viewer for the Grype JSON, and the thing I quite like about this is I can like switch to the severity view and say, show me all the critical issues. And it's just a way to view that JSON. And if you click on one and it shows you the summary there, you can press E and it actually runs Grype explain in the background and then captures the output and sticks it in there. And this is just a like silly little Python thing that's just taking the JSON output from Grype and turning it into something that's like human readable and navigable with a mouse or, with a keyboard. So yeah, I was quite pleased with that. As a couple of hours work. I was very happy. Good. Yeah, even if it does have a stupid name, Grummage. Anyway, moving on. Right, did anyone else have a selected thing they wanted to talk about?
The one that's at the top of your list, actually, is one that I wanted to bring up. The issue itself, we can discuss it within the bounds of, I think when we talked about the team earlier this week, it was how are we going to document things better about our tools? So to use this specific example as kind of a brainstorm or just a discussion point, if you generate a cyclone.dx JSON SBOM with Syft, any will do, like an Alpine latest for the fastest output or anything like that, you'll see on every package, there is a field called properties, and Syft has its own namespace. And if you look on this issue, this is one of the OWASP co-leads for cyclone.dx actually who filed this. You'll see that we have a Syft namespace registered with them where we can put properties, and we're buttressed next to a bunch of other projects who also have reserved namespaces for properties in the cyclone.dx format, but they have like their taxonomy actually as part of like the Amazon inspector or a JSON schema or any kind of descriptive language. And right now, all we have is if you see the prefix Syft and you see colon and you see some other words after that, you just have to know that that is reflective of the tree structure that is the Syft format. So for example, if you saw name is Syft colon package colon found by, you could literally go to the Syft JSON and do package.found by and see the same value. We've just reflected it over in the cyclone.dx. But that's not clear. We need a better way to document that. So the floor is kind of open to, what do people think specifically for this issue that we should start using to document our properties for cyclone.dx?
I guess one question I've got is that, like, do we think we need everything documented, or maybe if we found some things that are useful for people that they might want to like look for, like we could document those things and maybe not document everything. I don't know. I mean, I think the thing. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I thought you were done. Were you done? Yeah, I think one of the things that would be helpful is where we're doing something like the Syft colon, right, where we made up our own property type that we put in cyclone.dx. And we should definitely write down what we mean by that, because they're not going to find that anywhere else. I do think that something like package name is less useful to document, although we do run into things like we've seen issues within the CDX spec. Like, I think it might be useful to document how we take things in the spec to meet. Because, for example, like NPM has the like namespace like things where you do like at AWS/CDK or whatever. And those get represented in different ways by different people outputting a cyclone DX SBOM. Like, I think there's like a group ID field or like a group field, and the at AWS will get put in the group field by some tools, but I think Syft puts like and they're not called namespaces. I wish I could remember what NPM called them.
I know you're talking
But
about
there's like
organizations or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think. Organizations. Anyway, so the organization field, like I think Syft puts in the package name for NPM, it puts like just like you see on NPM, right? At organization/package name. But there are some people who trim off that first part and put it in a different field.
Yep.
And like that really confuses Grype, because then Grype doesn't know whether you're a tool that does that when it's reading the CDX JSON. And so documenting like if there's ambiguity in the spec or we've made a choice in the spec would be really helpful. And I think documenting how we map would be really helpful. Like saying like, you know, like these Syft JSON relationship types, I think we have more relationship types than Cyclone DX. And so we could document a mapping, like when we convert our internal model to Cyclone DX, like these are the changes we make. This is the information that's lost. These are the assumptions we make. This is how we map this stuff. Would be super valuable. So that's sort of my take there.
I have a small wrench to kind of throw into this discussion, just because I want to talk about strategies of the best way to do this documentation, given kind of the facts of the data structure. The Syft data that's being reflected over into Cyclone DX is hierarchical, right? It's a tree where you have Syft, you go to a field metadata, you go to another field, you can go to it can keep going infinitely, right? All of that becomes just one thing called name in Cyclone DX that's colon separated by how deep you go. And then all of that is a flat list. So you have a flat list of things with the name field that are as long as deep as you've accessed on the tree for that exact property. And it gets even stranger. Yeah, we could pull up a Cyclone DX file on the screen if Alan, if you have one handy or if you generate one. And I'll keep talking before we pull this up. On the specifically for the value of the name, Syft has a polymorphic data type for metadata. So when you see the field Syft : metadata, that metadata could be one type of metadata for any number of the packages that we describe. So yeah, nice. Okay, and if you just vim / or grep for properties, and
yeah, I'm just scrolling. I just
screen.
Punched it out. I didn't.
That's okay.
There
yeah,
you go.
Perfect. Right there. So you see Syft : distro ID, or that's just actually the distro information. So we could even find a package that has metadata about it. Perfect. If you keep going up, see how it's like says Syft : metadata.
That one right there.
You are right there. Syft CPE 23, Syft : package : metadata type. Like it just gets kind of nasty as we go down. So documenting these names in, I don't know, in a formal way, it seems very tricky from a saying like, what does this exact delimited name mean in this document? And to us, it just means that, oh, we had to stick it somewhere because we didn't want Syft to be lossy when we converted back to Syft JSON. But I wanted to talk through like what the usefulness is of getting these fields down and saying what a name property means here for Cyclone DX.
I think it might be worth just writing down how we're generating these, because like, I mean, some of these, maybe it's because I look at Syft all day, but some of these look like Syft colon package colon type seems like Syft thinks this is a deb package. Seems like that seems like what that means. And so it might be nice to just say, like, somewhere have a paragraph that's like, for properties that do not correspond with a field in CycloneDX, we emit a named metadata with like the path in our JSON colon delimited, and then the value. And like just say that's what we do, and then have a link to where we document what we mean. Like if you do Syft, if you do artifacts 0 found by, that's our name for the cataloger that found the package. So I think like basically writing down how to look up what we mean by these fields sort of arbitrarily, it would be really good docs for this. Because I think a lot of them are pretty straightforward, like Syft location 0 layer ID, right? That's like the first location that we believe was evidence for this package. This is the like OCI layer ID it was in, which is like, right. And so you can kind of put this back together and say that like, we found util Linux copyright at this path in this layer, and that's why we think there's this package. But if you're trying to understand this, having a paragraph that tells you how to get to the Syft schema docs and explain in the Syft schema, like what we mean by location. Why are there so many locations? Like, why are there 7 locations for this file? For this, I think these are the files that we consider to be evidence of this package.
These are, yeah, I mean, essentially this is, I think what Chris hit the nail on the head, before when he said this was the way for us to serialize the things that we couldn't figure out where else to put in CycloneDX. And like some of these things could be maybe rethought about, and maybe we could do a better job with some of the stuff. Like these locations, for example, all reference files. So like maybe those should be CycloneDX component files or something. But I mean, generally speaking, I think I agree with what you said, Will, which is like, I think if we could just show the schema, the Syft schema, and have some way to like, for people to go reference that, it's pretty clear looking at the properties where it maps to like some Syft data, for example. But I don't really know what else we would want to do beyond that.
Okay.
I think that does mean, though, to answer this ask, that we would want to we want to have somewhere where we've documented the Syft data model really well, and I don't think that exists today.
Okay, and so I guess my next question is, should that documentation for the JSONs, let's say we waved a magic wand and we had all the documentation we wanted for the Syft JSON schema. If we did do that and it lived on GitHub, we could then just reflect it and say, whatever you see in here, here's a pointer that links exactly to what the property field name means in a CycloneDX output, right? Like you could just reference from CycloneDX the exact documentation that we generated for JSON. Should that live somewhere on GitHub under our repo, or should we generate like our own docs website for it? And I've also linked in our like Zoom chat, I've linked the CycloneDX property taxonomy repo where all of these things for all namespaces of people creating documents are actually linked.
I think there's two things there. Like, do we like generate having a whole doc site is quite a chunky conversation. It's related. It's quite a chunky conversation. I think we can certainly, like wherever it lives, we can certainly generate some kind of markdown or whatever that is appropriate. Do we have to develop like something that's in a fixed schema format as well, or does it just have to be human readable markdown, or both if one is generated from the other?
I posted in the chat a link to where the filer of this ticket showed some examples. There's a couple of examples that pre-exist. One was from Amazon, one was from Siemens. So it might help to give like some context about what this kind of looks like. And the other thing, I was just exploring
Nice.
This requester's graph. They're going out to a lot of projects saying like, these, you've got something reserved, but it should go somewhere, even if it starts with an empty docs page. I think there's kind of try to move the needle on this one. But yeah, I thought it might be helpful to have some prior examples. Yeah.
So I'm just capturing those links because they're quite handy. Thank you.
I think, yeah, okay, so I think
But
based
to
on
your
those
question, I don't think
examples-
it's a common format. Oh, sorry. It looks like Markdown, like human readable.
Yeah, then I'm pretty game to just generate a Markdown human readable for both our JSON that, based on Will's comment and Keith's comments, the Markdown JSON, the Markdown that describes our JSON should also describe our property fields for CycloneDX. Like those should be equivalent, just because we're throwing things over the fence to CycloneDX to not be lossy when we convert back to the Syft side. So that they shouldn't be like two non-connected efforts is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah. And so I think we have the specific effort that like somebody who's exploring CycloneDX and discovers that there's like properties that start with Syft : are reserved for use by that tool should have a website they can go to figure out why and what that means. And then there's the related ask, which is people who are looking at Syft output and want to know what it means should have a website they can go to learn what it means. And I think these can be maybe the same website. I have a pretty strong preference for keeping stuff together. Like, I don't want to have like a separate docs repo and you have to like remind people to change the docs. Like I think ideally generating stuff from like doc comments or something, like the Go docs kind of thing would be easier. Like if we can generate the docs from source comments on the structs that get serialized, that would be the easiest thing because there's like one place to write it all down and you can go see what it all means.
Yeah, for all the format models, specifically for the Syft JSON format model, if we commented it completely, like with all the tagged fields, then that could just represent the comment survey field for the JSON schema. Go to the doc site for the Go doc site. I don't know how you would. You could then rip from that generated doc to like create the Markdown table. But yeah, there's some mutation that could be done there for the second DX.
We could generate the docs ourselves. I think literally Go docs is the command. So that might be nice.
Yeah, I just wanted to second that and also mention that, I mean, we could just generate all of the stuff once we have that. And I think there's a pretty easy way to do that in Go. There's a tool that lets you just read Go source files. I think it's part of the standard library maybe. Anyway, I think we're doing that in some places somewhere, and so it would be pretty easy to do.
So one of the things that I've noodled with a few of these documentation generators and had a play with a few that produce beautiful looking documentation that's appealing, and I agree with you that it is a good idea to keep the docs with the code so that we can ensure that it gets updated at the point when you're updating a feature or fixing a bug or changing a parameter or whatever. Can we then pull that, so we're going to have, let's say, docs in Syft, docs in Grype, docs in Grant, we could pull those together. The thing I've been looking at recently is Gitbook. I don't know if you've seen Gitbook. There's some really nice examples of documentation that's been done. Let's look at Linear, for example. It's appealing, it's consistent. We could pull together multiple different projects into one place and get search and all the cool stuff that everyone expects from developer documentation. And it's not just buried in a markdown file somewhere in a repo that nobody can find. That kind of thing.
I think one of the other important features this has, I've run into because the Go package website generates, it looks at all the comments and all the exported types and functions and stuff and generates web pages, and they're perfectly usable, and they link to the source code, and they even tell you what tag version this type first appeared in and stuff. So they're super cool, but there's no entry point, right? I go look at them and I'm like, well, this is a lot of information about how to use this very low level API construct that I happen to have landed on. But there's no what's the project, or there's less of that.
Mm.
So I think that the Git book makes a lot of sense. Maybe those are separate action items, is
Mhm.
because I think for like the specific documentation, like what does this type mean, what does this field mean, like commenting the exported structs that get serialized to that and linking to that on Go package or hosting those docs ourselves is a really good solution. But there's not a lot of like um how to even use this project, what it is, how to get started. Stuff doesn't really belong in there. I don't really know the best way of hosting that. I think those are sort of two different things and two different audiences, but they overlap a lot. So it would be a shame to have to rewrite things or CP things or whatever.
Right. And it
Um,
would be lovely if it was auto-generated, auto-published, whenever you guys make a change or do a release, there's a new set of docs created and it just gets auto-published to, docs.anchor.io or whatever, wherever it should live. I think that would be rather pleasant.
Okay. I'll write up a response to this issue with kind of the two-tiered approach. So the first one
Nice.
just being generate something that's through the Go tool that can then be mirrored to the Cyclone DX, like actual properties are being generated. And then the second tier being once we have things like spread across projects, amalgamating it up into the Git book kind of presenter mode. So I will get that started. Okay. Thanks everyone for the talk.
Nice. Thanks very much. Sweet. Dan, Keith, do either of you have any needs discussion items?
I think I added one this week from the triaging, but I can't remember what it is. So feel free to just do anything else.
Literally anything else. Okay. Well, these are all the ones that are tagged, and I think many of these are ones we've already talked about. We do have some suggestions from our very friendly Tim, and these are PRs that they'd like some eyeballs on. We generally try and use this for looking at issues and discussing issues, but I think Tim's keen to get some feedback on top of like feedback we've already provided in the past. What's the best strategy for doing this? Is that like, I've now told you Tim's raised these and, find some time to do that? Or do we discuss them right now here? What do you think is the best plan here?
So I think the second one, there's just a quick question on the related issue, and we can
Cool.
unblock that. So if you look at where it says closes 2264, you want to go click that. And then look at the bottom. So we discussed this on live stream.
Yeah.
I think even last week. And then Alex wrote up sort of what we decided, and I'm not sure it was specific enough. So I think Tomer, this GitHub user, has a question in the last comment that we could try to answer really quickly, and then that PR will be unblocked. So maybe trying to sort by best upgrade is a good enough first pass here. For a little more context, this is an issue where Grype will suggest that a vulnerability is fixed in. We try to put fixed in versions, which is basically like the version 1.2.3 has a patch. Also, version 2.6.8 has a patch. And the complaint is that sometimes we suggest downgrades, sometimes really big downgrades, because on a big vulnerability, maybe you're on version 17, but a fix has been backported to version 5. This is especially bad with the JVM, because literally you might be like, and so then it looks like Grype is suggesting you to downgrade from Java 17 to Java 8.
Was that the initial conversation right at the start? Yes. Okay. So that was, yes, we did talk about this last week, I think. Yeah.
And so then we had a discussion last week, and Alex wrote up the notes to it. But then I think the notes Alex wrote weren't quite enough to unblock this contributor who wants to close the issue with PR and has a PR open. So I think we could try to look at the comments since Alex's So I think sorting, I think we could just quickly, I just want to say, like, is sorting by best upgrade? Like, if we can come up with a stable sort that's like best fixed version, um, and then just sort by that is a pretty good first pass. So I think we can just say yes to this last comment, and then this will be unblocked. Does anybody disagree, or any more detail we need to dive into?
Yeah, I'm okay with the best quote best upgrade or like the latest version being the first one on the list. And if that's the assumption that people are making, then Tamara can just rip that off, and then we're not just like we're not hiding the fact that you could also downgrade to
Okay.
resolve the dependency as well. Yeah.
Right.
I can try to write a good, good clear comment there. So let me say
Nice one. That was quick
Right.
and easy. Well done.
sorting these values is right. Okay, so we agree that sorting these values is best approach.
Yeah, and I think part of what was missing from the last conversation is for Tomer specifically, one of the previous to his last comment in that ticket, he said he's actually consuming the JSON, so that makes sorting a good option
Mhm.
for that reason rather than an annotation
Yeah.
just in the
Um,
2e.
Tim's in the chat and says they'll get on it. So brilliant. Immediate
Okay.
feedback.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yay.
Thanks,
Thank
Tim.
you.
We appreciate it. There's two others, the squash all layers and disable package scan. I don't know, is there code review required here or
So yeah, I don't have context on disable package scan.
so this is an issue,
Um,
disable package scan and use other oh, okay.
Only use file scanning and like disable all package catalogers effectively, I think. And
oh,
it's, is that
yeah.
what it?
This is
Yeah,
the one that's
would
addressed
this-
by Alex's pull request that he just made, and we have to like
Yeah.
go. Yeah, so we should link that if it's not.
Yeah,
already.
let's
Alec dove in this one for sure.
yeah, so basically Alex is going to add the file catalogers as also named catalogers that can be selected via the same mechanism. So then you could do like minus image minus directory plus file or something here, and it would give you all the file catalogers and no packages, something like that. So I think this will probably be
I linked-
implemented. Oh,
Yeah,
did
it
you
will-
link them now?
It will be implemented by this one. I linked it in our chat. It's this is pull request 3505. One of us we just have to work. One of us has to work with Alex to it's not passing right now to get across the finish line. I think that came from stand up today, where we just have to go back and treat this one with some love.
Yeah, and there's some like there's a little bit of subtlety to it because there'll be sort of more than one way of selecting which file catalogers run and which files they apply to. So the file catalogers can generally be run in three modes, which is all files, files owned by packages, or no files. I think if you're going to turn off all the package catalogers, the only one that makes sense is all, because none will produce nothing and owned by packages will produce nothing. So I think we need to explicitly talk about how 3505 is going to implement that. I think we probably want to go with Alex's pull request as a way to implement it. I think it's hard to talk about Alex's pull request without Alex. But I think this is something we meant to do in the Syft 1.0 work and didn't have time, was to make the file catalogers and the package catalogers selectable via the same interface. So this is sort of cleaning up that tech debt. But of course, we have other configs out in the wild and we're post 1.0. So the old way has to continue working. So this needs a bit of a deep dive on like the user experience. Like it gives you two places in the config file where you can contradict yourself, what should happen. And so I think I think we can, I think we need to associate. I think we should also link in this one to the issue from Tomer that we were just discussing. But then we probably need to discuss it when Alex is here. Is I think my TLDR on it. Um,
I would just mention one quick thing about this, or about what you said, which is we do have multi-level configuration for a bunch of different things. So that's a pattern that we use where, there's a top level thing. So, the like the cataloger selection, I guess, would potentially be like a top level thing. And then the multi-level would be if they set some, like one of those specific
Yeah.
configurations for, down, then that sort of takes precedence. That's kind of what we've done in the past for that.
Yeah, I think this would be two different places in that tree that affect the same behavior. And I think unavoidably without taking a breaking change, which is why I sort of want to discuss it with Alex, because the like .file .metadata selection part of the tree and the catalogers part of the tree sort of interact if we do this change.
Sweet.
So let's just make sure that when we're trying to get 3505 in, we also discuss this issue. But I think we need to probably, because I think 3505 is part of Alex's like vision for Syft 1.0 that didn't quite make the actual 1.0 PRs. So we want him here to discuss it.
I tagged Tomer on 3468, the pull request that he filed, with the link to this pull request, just saying, hey, we don't implicitly want to do this behavior when the final task is 0. That was the change that he kind of made, where Syft would do nothing on main, but now if nothing is selected, when Syft decide instead of doing nothing, it would just do these types of catalogers. So we want more user configuration, more user choice to pick and choose which catalogers are going. So that's kind of like the final say on what that PR represents. And the discussion about this behavior is just going to happen on this larger thread with the larger changes behind it.
Cool. So I left a comment on the bottom of this one, just linking to Tim's PR, so that's taken on board. Brilliant. Thank you. Cool. And so we need to focus on that a little bit offline, I think. The other one is quite the big one. I was just chatting to Tim in the chat, which is the squashed all layers, and I don't know where we are with this one.
Yeah, Keith, do you have more context on this one? I haven't reviewed this deeply. I've seen comments from you and Alex on it.
I haven't looked in a week or so, but I think that there was something that we said we kind of needed done here that hadn't been done, but I'm not sure what the state of it is right now, so I don't know.
Okay. Do you know what that was?
I'm looking.
So, yeah, this is an interesting feature. Maybe it's worth trying to talk through what the feature is while we can have like other team members try to figure out whether the changes we requested.
I did mention to Tim that this, we might not get time for it to like go deep dive in it, and they're cool with that, so that's good.
But I think it's worth talking through the feature, especially because if I try to explain the feature with contributors in the chat, they can tell me if I'm wrong, which would be awesome to find out. So I think the idea right now, Syft takes a flag called scope, and what scope takes two values, which is squashed and all layers. So squashed means so the way OCI images work is they like layer change sets. So like each row in your Docker file, you have like from Alpine latest, and then you do run apk add curl or whatever. So now there's two layers, right? There's whatever Alpine latest was, or at least two layers, and then there's a layer. And so the file system diff that results from like each statement in your Docker file makes a layer. And then So if you run Syft in squashed mode, which is the default, then Syft is essentially cataloging stuff that made it into the last layer, right? So if you do something like, in layer 2, you install curl it, and then layer 4, you uninstall curl isn't there in the last layer. Or if you upgrade it between 2 layers. I had a discourse question about that this week, and so I ran through testing it manually just to make sure I understood. But so squashed is like the squashed scope is like if you take all the layers and like apply the diffs on top of each other, you end up with like the file system as it will actually be if you run the image. That's what squashed means. That's what we think you care about by default. There's also all layers where like if you want to know whether oh, that might be why Grype was taking so long
Yeah, probably.
earlier.
Oh, okay. I thought I had some.
But you could
Sorry.
Yeah, you could do like if you want to do like Docker image inspect like Alpine latest or something, I think that should work.
Do I need to pull it first?
Maybe. I don't know.
Oh man.
But see, so you downloaded, right? So you could try Docker image inspect. I think you're missing
Actually, the image ID.
inspect.
Thank you. Like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you could see like I think there's, right. So there's IDs and tags, and I think down here there are also images or layers rather. Yeah, so there's a root FS with some layers, and I think Alpine latest they're baking a single layer. But then if you did a from Alpine latest and you ran a command, you would get 2 layers. And so basically, squash is sort of resolve the file system diffs from all the layers and report on what's there in the end, which is the same thing you would find if you like ran exec into the container and ran ls. And then there is all layers, which is like if curl was present in layer 3 and then deleted in layer 7, we still report it. And that's why if you look at locations in the Syft JSON, we don't just have a path, we also have a layer ID so that we can say like, and like in layer ID, Longshaw, at path, whatever, we found this thing. And I think what we're trying to add here is a sort of like a which layer adds it. So squashed sort of like loses some of the differentiation. And all layers loses information about like what's still there in the final build. I guess maybe you could reconstruct it from the XBOM. But my understanding is that squashed all layers will tell us like what layer a thing came from. And that's not a capability we have today. So that's me trying to explain what this pull request is, which I think is an interesting discussion. I haven't actually tried to understand the code yet. I think Keith and Alex have given some feedback, but it also looks like Tomer has updated a bunch of code. I think the main concern is the main concern I understood was the performance that we need to like because ending up like searching every directory, searching the squash scope, and then searching every layer to figure out where it was added was taking a long time or something like that. But that's I'm out of details on this issue now. So if somebody else wants to take over and talk about how the PR is doing or what our next steps are, that'd be awesome.
I'll just add a couple things. I'll say the one thing that would have been a blocker for me was like modifying some of the core data structures. That looks like that's not happening anymore in the PR. So it's probably time to give it a good review. But I will mention one other thing, which is Alex and I got to talk. I probably spurned by this PR at one point, but we kind of got to talking about how, like if that makes sense, or if there's like some better way that we might be able to scan OCI images and get the information that we're looking for, like the first layer that something's present. And we sort of came up with a way to do it that we thought would be fairly efficient and eliminate duplicate scanning of most things. But it was a lot more of like a stereoscope type of a change than this one. So like this could potentially happen in tandem. But I just kind of want to mention that like we have been giving some thought to that, because I think like one of the things we would like, I mean, as a user, I'd like to be able to do would be like to kind of have the all layers scan to know if something like was present, even if it isn't now, but quickly, right? Without the performance penalty of doing the all layer scan. Like, I think a lot of people might like that, because it would be kind of like eye opening to know if like, oh, I'm getting, you know, some log4j installed and then it's gone. Like what happened during that layer build, you know, like that's like interesting stuff to know. But we do know that like when we do the all layer scan, it's like basically doing squashed at each layer. And, you know, so it's just like multiplicative time there. But we think we kind of we waxed philosophical in a way we might be able to do it in a relatively performant way.
Would it also reveal like toolchain that was installed early on in the process and then removed like once one of the components had been built? And so that would enable you to reveal details about like the toolchain that was there that built the thing.
Potentially, sure. Yeah.
Potentially. It depends. There's like you could do a multi-step Docker image which does erase that information.
Of course.
So if you do like I don't know, from Ubuntu latest as build and you apt-get install a bunch of headers and build this like static thing, and then you do, you know, from scratch as prod copy build my app foo /
Right.
and then you're done. We just have a one file Docker image and that's that. But if they are just like, if there are tools that are just present in intermediate layers within the same Docker build, we would be able to find them.
Perfect. Okay. I realize we're over time. I've written up everything down here that we discussed. So if anyone wants, I've put all the timestamps in there. They're not linked, but they are timestamps, so you can fast forward to the right point. Thanks again to Tim for joining in and contributing, and also for those lovely PRs. And thanks for anyone who watches this at double speed. I feel sorry for you when you watch this at double speed tomorrow. Thanks very much, everyone. And we'll see you all next time. Thank you all. Thanks.
I
Will,
promise to
Chris,
talk
Kevin.
slower next time.
No, please don't.
Talk slower.
I love the speed you talk is just perfect as it is.